Are viewers ready to learn the shocking truth about how the harsh nature of the North became its inhabitants' greatest ally? What lies behind the popular myths about ruthless seafarers reveals a completely different picture of a deep understanding of the laws of the surrounding world. Scandinavia's harsh winters demanded incredible ingenuity just to maintain a tolerable temperature inside a large wooden dwelling. The craftsmen of that era lacked modern technology, yet their structures successfully withstood biting winds and months-long frosts. Every massive log, every dense clod of earth, and every handful of snow became part of a well-thought-out system of protection against the merciless cold. Everyone should watch this video to the end to learn the true cost of creating a warm home amidst the endless ice. The secret, passed down from generation to generation, lies in a unique approach to selecting building materials. Wood served not merely as the main framework, but as the first and primary line of defense against merciless winter storms. Carpenters ventured into dense forests to search for the oldest and strongest oaks on high, rocky slopes. The harsh growing conditions made the wood incredibly dense, heavy, and resistant to the destructive effects of moisture from the soil. The thick trunks that were felled were carefully stripped of their bark and hewn with heavy hand axes into perfectly flat building planks. In one of the remote fjords, a story has been preserved about the incredible durability of such massive wooden dwellings. An elderly grandmother lived alone in a long wooden house built by skilled craftsmen back in the days of her youth. One moonless winter, a large bear approached her secluded dwelling, driven by the bitter cold and a fierce hunger. The beast tried to break through the wooden wall with its powerful paws, furiously bearing down on the massive oak planks with all its enormous weight. The woman remained completely calm by the burning hearth, knowing full well that the thick logs would withstand this fierce onslaught. The craftsman carefully removed the outer layer of sapwood, leaving only the hardest and most durable heartwood of the sturdy tree trunk. After the initial processing, the craftsman set about creating complex joints at the ends of each individual log. Carpenters skillfully carved deep grooves and massive tenons that allowed the elements to be securely fastened without a single iron nail. This ingenious fastening system provided the structure with the necessary flexibility, allowing the massive building to deform slightly during strong storm winds. Rigidly fastened wooden walls could easily crack under the force of the elements, while the movable joints absorbed the load. The wood naturally expanded as humidity levels rose, making all wooden castles even more airtight and watertight. For additional and crucial protection against rot, the lower logs of the large wooden log cabin were thoroughly treated with an open fire. The surface of the wood was lightly charred, creating a natural, dense, protective layer against soil moisture and the destructive effects of time. The charred lower logs were laid on a level stone foundation, which raised the main structure above the damp and cold ground. The stones for the heavy foundation were selected with particular care and laid out along the entire vast perimeter of the future spacious residential house. This was undeniable evidence of the highest level of carpentry skill available to craftsmen in that harsh and highly demanding historical era. The wooden frame served not only as physical protection, but also as a key element of acoustic comfort inside the large, spacious house. The thick logs excellently absorbed the loud sounds of the howling wind outside, creating an atmosphere of complete calm and long-awaited silence inside. During the fiercest winter blizzards, the residents could rest peacefully by the warm fire, completely undistracted by the roar of the raging elements. The wood transformed the wooden dwelling into a veritable acoustic fortress, reliably insulated from the hostile and cold external soundscape. The process of constructing a large-scale wooden frame always required the coordinated and strenuous labor of the entire settlement over many long weeks. The most experienced carpenters strictly supervised the process, while the rest of the community helped lift and install the heavy logs. This collective physical labor strengthened social bonds and fostered a deep sense of shared responsibility for the safety of every individual. The completed wooden framework became an important symbol of collective strength and the ability to stand firm against the harshest challenges of the northern wilderness. Each successfully installed wooden post was seen as another victory over the cold and an important step towards safe survival. The wooden foundation of a massive house vividly demonstrates the remarkable determination of ancient builders in their constant struggle against the harsh northern climate. Every meticulously fitted detail of this complex and lengthy process required immense physical effort and a deep understanding of the material's properties. It's interesting to hear opinions on how reliable and durable such a multi-layered wooden structure seems to modern people. Viewers are invited to share their thoughts in the comments about the quality of these massive historical dwellings. Subscribing to the channel will help you stay up to date on new, exciting stories about amazing survival technologies from the distant past. What if all the old knowledge about architecture is long outdated and doesn't reflect the true picture of the past? Thick wooden planks alone proved completely insufficient for effective and complete protection against the biting, icy wind. Builders erected a second outer wall around the main wooden frame, making extensive use of dense, heavy blocks of turf cut from the soil. The space between the inner wooden wall and the thick outer earthen wall created a kind of deep air pocket to maintain a comfortable temperature. This massive earthen layer acted as an ideal natural insulator, completely blocking the icy northern air from entering. This principle of constructing thick double walls reliably blocked absolutely any drafts, carefully preserving the precious heat from the burning central hearth. The sod for the protective outer embankment was cut from the nearest open meadows using special wide shovels with sharp metal edges. Experienced builders always chose areas with a very dense and tough root system of grasses to ensure the greatest strength of the earthen blocks. The dense, intertwined roots firmly bound the heavy chunks of moist earth into a single unit, preventing them from crumbling during transport. The resulting rectangular blocks of dense earth were laid around the wooden log structure like neat brickwork, forming a sturdy protective barrier. The fresh, damp earth gradually dried in the wind, while the living roots continued to intertwine within the earthen masonry. This natural process slowly transformed the composite wall into an absolutely monolithic and incredibly strong earthen structure. Such a massive earthen embankment could reach an astonishing thickness of over 1 meter at the very base of the spacious wooden building. The sod wall gradually tapered toward the top of the structure, providing it with additional structural stability under its own weight. The earthen outer shell constantly served as a huge natural heat accumulator throughout the long, frosty winter. A dense layer of compacted earth excellently absorbed accidental impacts and prevented the rapid spread of fire in the event of an accidental external fire. Extracting and laying such a huge amount of sod required colossal physical effort from all able-bodied adult members of the northern community. Hundreds of heavy earthen blocks were carried by hand on special wooden stretchers from the cutting site directly to the construction site. Each individual earthen section had to fit tightly against the next to avoid the formation of unwanted empty gaps and cold bridges. Builders carefully tamped down the joints between individual blocks, adding wet clay to maximize the compaction of the massive protective earthen shell. The building tradition of constructing thick earthen walls was passed down by craftsmen over many long centuries without significant changes to the design. This brilliant engineering solution allowed people to survive successfully in places where the air temperature remained critically low for most of the year. The builders deeply understood the incredible value of ordinary soil and skillfully utilized all of its beneficial natural physical properties for their protection. The combination of solid wood and soft earth created the perfect balance between structural strength and the superb thermal efficiency of the northern home. Earthen embankments became an integral and vital part of the grand historical architectural appearance of the classic settlements of that distant, harsh era. The experience of their ancestors clearly showed that the simple soil beneath their feet could become the most reliable fortress against any icy wind. The sod blocks required careful handling during transport, but once laid, they formed a wall of incredible, indestructible strength. Buildings with such earthen protection could stand successfully for decades, requiring only minor annual cosmetic repairs to the outer protective layer. This was truly a triumphant use of the most ordinary and accessible natural resources to solve a critically important problem of survival. The engineering ingenuity of the ancient masters allowed them to transform pliable, moist meadow soil into an indestructible architectural shield of colossal reliability. A natural question arises regarding the effectiveness of other available winter resources in the constantly changing and harsh northern climate. The next chapter reveals the astonishing secret of how the coldest natural material was transformed into a powerful source of valuable heat. The hidden truth that many constantly keep quiet lies in the ingenious use of real ice and fluffy snow for construction. With the arrival of the harsh winter, the fluffy snow that fell in vast quantities was never cleared far from the thick earthen walls of the houses. On the contrary, the practical inhabitants deliberately raked the voluminous snowdrifts as close as possible to the earthen ramparts of their massive wooden dwellings. Fresh snow contains a vast amount of air, which serves as the finest and completely free natural insulator. A dense layer of compacted snow prevented the thick earthen walls and the main wooden frame from freezing further under the strong wind. The air temperature directly beneath this blanket of snow always remained stable, significantly exceeding the critical levels found in the open, frosty outdoors. This remarkable white barrier functioned like a classic igloo, reliably trapping the thermal radiation from the thick walls of the longhouse. The fiercer the snowstorm raged outside, the thicker and more reliable the natural insulating protection around the dwelling became. People were not at all afraid of heavy snowfalls, viewing them as a generous gift from nature for additional and very important winter insulation. The snow completely sealed all the tiniest cracks in the outer perimeter, permanently blocking access to any cold, bone-chilling drafts. With the onset of brief spring thaws, the bottom layer of snow, adjacent to the earthen walls, began to melt slowly and very gently. The resulting cold water would freeze when the nighttime cold returned, creating a solid, completely windproof crust of ice around the house. This hard, icy shell provided incredibly effective protection against the strong spring winds, which were considered the most dangerous and biting. The ice acted as a perfect sealant, transforming the dwelling into a completely enclosed capsule, impervious to any external weather events. The builders skillfully turned the destructive force of the frosty environment into a reliable protector, demonstrating remarkable ingenuity and incredible observation of their surroundings. Working with large volumes of snow required constant attention from all residents to prevent the dangerous collapse of the roof. Men regularly cleared excess heavy wet snow from the roof using long wooden poles, leaving only a safe, thin layer. Snowdrifts near the walls were periodically packed down with their feet so that the snow mass became denser and would not be blown away by strong gusts of wind. This daily routine was a necessary condition for safe survival during the endlessly long and incredibly cold winter months. Snow transformed from a bitter enemy into an obedient servant, carefully protecting human lives in conditions of extremely low temperatures. The winter house, encased in a shell of snow, looked like a completely natural element of the endless white landscape, blending in completely with the surrounding terrain. Thick smoke rising from the chimney on the roof remained the only visible sign of warm life inside this massive snow mound. Beneath the thick layer of cold white snow, life continued to bustle within the longhouse, hidden from prying eyes and the biting winds. The use of snow as an excellent insulator vividly demonstrates the highest level of practicality and the remarkable adaptability of ancient northern building traditions. It was a true masterpiece of applied engineering, created from the most fragile and ephemeral natural material in the entire cold land. Without this snow barrier, the consumption of precious firewood to heat such a vast living space would have increased several-fold. Snow saved not only heat, but also human labor that would have been spent on dangerous winter logging in the freezing cold. The wise use of all available natural resources was the primary and fundamental principle of survival under conditions of extremely limited material resources. The snow shield became a brilliant symbol of the ultimate victory of the human mind over the merciless and utterly indifferent forces of nature in the harsh northern world.
Strong work, bro.
Every viewer who appreciates the ingenuity of the northern builders is invited to like this video. What was found in the old archives truly amazes the imagination of modern roofers with its unusual effectiveness and natural aesthetics. Creating a high-quality and reliable roof has always been considered the most critical stage in the entire construction process of a classic northern longhouse. A solid deck of even planks or tightly fitted smooth long poles was carefully laid over sturdy, thick oak rafters. On top of this sturdy wooden deck, builders spread several wide layers of birch bark, which provided absolutely perfect and complete waterproofing. The birch bark was laid neatly with overlapping edges, like fish scales, so that rain and meltwater would always roll unimpeded down the roof slopes. It was precisely this flexible, waterproof layer that reliably protected the interior from constant atmospheric dampness and the destructive rot of wooden structures. High-quality birch bark was harvested exclusively in the spring, when this valuable material could be easily and effortlessly stripped from the tree trunk. The heavy green roof performed several critically important physical functions at once to maintain the proper climate inside the massive house. It provided excellent thermal insulation, keeping out cold air in winter and protecting the interior from intense summer overheating in the sun. The enormous weight of the soil layer firmly pressed all the elements of the wooden structure together, making the building completely hurricane-resistant. The grass on the roof absorbed a significant portion of the heavy rainfall, substantially reducing the overall water load on the birch bark waterproofing layer. Over time, the turf roof transformed into a full-fledged flowering meadow where wild goats and domestic sheep could graze peacefully. The builders carefully designed a complex drainage system to prevent dangerous erosion of the earthen roof covering during heavy downpours. Along the edges of the massive roof, long wooden logs with deeply carved channels were installed, serving as modern-day downspouts for rainwater. These channels diverted excess rainwater away from the earthen walls, protecting the lower earthen embankment from inevitable physical erosion. The edges of the birch bark were intentionally extended beyond the wooden eaves, forming a small overhang to smoothly guide the flowing water droplets. All these small construction details demonstrate the ancient craftsman's exceptional practical engineering understanding of the principles of effective water drainage. The use of living earth on the roof created a unique architectural harmony between the human dwelling and the harsh northern landscape. The house literally grew into the rocky soil, becoming an absolutely integral and organic part of the vast, wild, green Scandinavian hill. This approach to architecture reflected people's deep philosophical respect for the mighty forces of nature and their desire to live by its strict laws. The green roof served as a reliable shield that sheltered people from the wrath of the cold heavens and gave them a sense of absolute security. It was truly an ideal combination of magnificent engineering solutions and a deep, intuitive understanding of the properties of available natural building materials. The turf roof structure is one of the most striking and recognizable symbols of ancient northern traditional wooden architecture. Could such a massive roof successfully withstand the harsh test of completely different, modern climatic conditions and man-made temperature fluctuations? A fundamental question arises. How often did such green roofs require major repairs under conditions of constant torrential rain? In the next chapter, we will delve into the secrets of the house's interior layout and learn about the proper placement of the central hearth. The interior of the northern longhouse was designed with a single primary goal: to retain as much of the precious warm air as possible. The central element of the entire massive structure was always a long, open hearth, situated right in the middle of the earthen rammed floor. The fire in this long stone trough burned around the clock, serving as the sole source of necessary heat and light during the long winter months. The dimensions of the central hearth were truly impressive and could reach several meters in length to heat the enormous living space. Absolutely all of the community's domestic life centered around the living fire. Here, they prepared hot meals, dried wet clothes, and carried out repairs. Smoke from the large fire rose high up toward the high ceiling and slowly escaped through special exhaust vents in the roof. These ventilation holes could be easily adjusted using long wooden poles to retain heat and prevent excessive smoke. Smoke played a crucial role in maintaining the optimal condition of the massive wooden ceiling structures throughout decades of active use. Thick soot and various resinous substances settled densely on the rafters, creating a magnificent natural protective layer that acted as an antiseptic and water repellent. This smoke barrier effectively killed any harmful wood-boring insects and completely prevented dangerous rot in the ceiling beams caused by accidental moisture. The design of the doors in a log house deserves a completely separate and very close examination by modern engineers and architectural historians. Doorways were intentionally made very low and quite narrow to minimize massive heat loss when people entered and exited. The doors themselves were made of thick, heavy oak planks, tightly fitted together to completely eliminate any gaps. The threshold was always made high to block the cold, frosty air that crept low along the ground during winter snowstorms. Often, a small additional vestibule was added in front of the main entrance, serving as a buffer zone between the frosty street and the warm house. The absence of large windows in the walls was a deliberate and very important architectural decision to maintain the internal thermal balance. Glass was a completely inaccessible material, and open openings would have led to the instant loss of all the precious hot air that had been accumulated. Sparse lighting was provided only by the fire from the central hearth and small oil lamps placed in the corners of the large, dark room. The dim light inside the longhouse was perceived as a completely normal phenomenon to which people quickly and easily grew accustomed from birth. The top priority was always to reliably keep the warm air inside the thick walls, while aesthetics and lighting took a back seat. A thick partition separated people from animals, but heat exchange through the thin cracks in the boards continued constantly throughout the winter. Such absolute integration of all resources vividly demonstrates the incredible level of rationality and practicality of the ancient northern peoples. Controlling the fire in the long hearth required round-the-clock attention and considerable experience in handling both dry and damp firewood. Dry birch logs produced a quick, intense heat, while resinous pine branches ensured a long, steady, and consistent burn. At night, the huge fire was slightly smothered by covering the coals with a thick layer of hot ash to allow for slow, safe smoldering until morning. In the morning, it was enough to simply stir up the gray ash and toss in a little dry kindling for the fire to flare up brightly again. The hearth was the true heart of the entire house, and its constant, uninterrupted beating meant the continuation of a safe life for the entire large community. Life inside the longhouse was filled with hard daily labor, but it was precisely this routine that ensured the people's physical survival. All architectural and domestic solutions had been refined to absolute practical perfection through endless trial and error over generations. The craftsmen managed to create an incredibly cozy and protected inner world, completely shielded from the icy madness of the northern world outside. What lies behind the closed wooden doors of these ancient dwellings is truly astonishing in its profound thoughtfulness and incredible attention to detail. Even the most tightly fitted thick wooden planks would eventually dry out and form small but very dangerous gaps for the wind. To reliably seal these vulnerable spots, northern craftsmen consistently used specially prepared bog moss and dense, sticky clay. Long fibers of damp moss were tightly packed into every microscopic crack using pointed wooden wedges and heavy hammers. This common natural material possessed excellent antibacterial properties and did not rot at all from the constant damaging effects of external precipitation. The clay consistently served as an excellent external sealant, securely holding the dry moss in place within the cracks and protecting it from being completely blown out by the wind. The viscous clay mixture was carefully applied over the packed moss, forming a strong and perfectly smooth protective crust after it had completely dried. This complex two-component natural sealant possessed remarkable elasticity and did not crack at all during the seasonal natural expansion of the wooden walls. The craftsmen carefully inspected every square centimeter of the enormous house so as not to miss even the slightest crack in the thick log walls. The caulking process took many days of painstaking labor, requiring immense patience and high precision from each individual craftsman. The quality of the finished insulation was checked using an incredibly simple, yet remarkably effective ancient practical method carried out after dark. A person holding a lit candle would slowly walk through the house, holding the flame up to all the sealed joints and corners of the massive wooden structure. If the candle flame began to flicker suspiciously, this clearly indicated the presence of a hidden microscopic draft in the wooden wall. The identified weak spot was immediately marked with chalk and carefully caulked again with a double portion of dry moss and fresh clay mortar. This rigorous inspection procedure was repeated until the flame remained absolutely still in every corner of the large house. Particular and the most careful attention was always paid to sealing the corner joints of massive logs where the likelihood of drafts was highest. Complex wooden joints had many internal hidden cavities that had to be completely filled with soft insulating material. Here, the craftsmen used special curved iron hooks to push the moss fibers deep into the most inaccessible parts of the structure. The corners of the house always bore the brunt of winter storms, so insulating them required maximum effort and concentration. A properly caulked corner of a wooden log house never let in moisture and completely blocked the piercing cold airflow. The combination of sturdy wood, soft moss, and hard clay created a stunning multi-layered system of effective natural insulation. The wood bore all the primary structural loads, while the moss and clay provided absolute and complete wind protection. This synergy of the simplest materials allowed for results comparable in quality to modern construction sealants and foams. A natural question arises: where did the craftsmen find so many specific building materials in a harsh climate with a short, warm summer? How long could such a fragile natural sealant last under conditions of constant and very sharp daily temperature fluctuations? A fundamental question arises. How often did they have to re-caulk the completely dried-out old oak logs in such a massive house? The next chapter will reveal stunning details of arduous winter expeditions in search of high-quality construction timber through deep snow and in bitter cold. The search for suitable timber to build a massive house always began long before the first foundation stones were actually laid on the ground. Experienced craftsmen preferred to go into the forest only during the harshest winter frosts, when sap flow into the trees had completely stopped. A tree felled in winter contains a minimal amount of excess moisture, making it much less prone to subsequent cracking and warping. Furthermore, the complete absence of sap makes the wood completely unattractive to dangerous wood-boring beetles and other destructive forest pests. Winter logging was an incredibly arduous and dangerous process, but it was an absolutely necessary condition for obtaining the ideal material. The loggers' expeditions lasted for many days and took place in conditions of extremely low temperatures, sometimes reaching critical physical limits. Groups of strong men ventured deep into the snow-covered thickets, armed only with heavy, broad-bladed axes and sturdy hemp ropes. They carefully tapped the trunks of old, tall pines with the back of the axe, determining the density and health of the tree's inner core by the ringing sound. Trees that were diseased or severely damaged by rot were immediately rejected, as they could not provide the building with the necessary structural strength. The selection of each suitable giant tree was accompanied by lengthy debates among the craftsmen, as the ultimate durability of the entire future dwelling depended on it. The process of felling a massive old tree by hand required the highest level of physical fitness and precise knowledge of the complex mechanics of the tree trunk. The lumberjacks made deep, even wedge-shaped notches on two opposite sides of the massive trunk, carefully calculating the correct direction of fall. Under no circumstances was the falling heavy tree to damage the neighboring young trunks or split upon striking the frozen ground. The loud crack of breaking wood echoed through the quiet, frosty forest, heralding the harvest of yet another magnificent log for construction. After the tree fell, it was immediately and very carefully stripped of all long side branches using light hand axes. Sometimes, to obtain material with special properties, highly unusual and incredibly time-consuming ancient forestry techniques were employed. For example, craftsmen might deliberately cut a wide strip of bark from a living pine tree and leave it standing in that state for several years. In response, the tree would begin to actively secrete thick, sticky resin to heal the massive wound, saturating the trunk with a natural preservative. When cut down several years later, such a heavily resin-coated tree became completely impervious to water and could last for centuries without rotting. Such clever techniques vividly demonstrate how deeply people understood the complex biology of trees and knew how to manipulate it. Harvesting enough timber for a single large, long house could easily take several very long and grueling winter seasons in a row. It was a colossal long-term project that required the participation of dozens of strong men and a vast amount of necessary food supplies. Every blow of the axe against the frozen hard wood caused pain in their joints, but the men continued to work tirelessly for the sake of future warmth. The winter forest forgave not even the slightest mistake or the slightest physical weakness, severely punishing the loggers with severe frostbite and dangerous injuries. But it was precisely from this grueling and dangerous labor that the strongest and most durable wooden structures of the northern world were born. The philosophy of logging was based on the principles of sensible and extremely economical use of the available natural resources of the wild northern forest. Lumberjacks never cut down all the old trees in one place, leaving part of the healthy forest for natural seed regeneration of the thicket. They understood perfectly well that a completely destroyed forest would deprive their descendants of the ability to build new homes and survive the harsh winters. A careful and respectful attitude toward the forest was not merely a beautiful cultural tradition, but a strict practical rule for safe survival. Every huge tree that was felled was seen as a generous gift from nature, one that must be used with maximum efficiency and respect. The supreme quality of the North's wooden structures would have been absolutely impossible without an excellent arsenal of high-quality hand tools. Blacksmiths forged wide carpentry axes from superior iron, which were distinguished by their incredible sharpness and the perfect balance of their heavy blades. The wide cutting edge of such a specialized axe allowed craftsmen to remove very thin and even shavings from the surface of a hard oak log. The axe handles were made of strong and resilient ash wood to reliably dampen the intense vibration caused by constant, hard strikes against the log. This tool was a true extension of the craftsman's hand, allowing him to create perfectly smooth wooden surfaces without the use of planes. In addition to heavy axes, the most essential tool in any carpenter's arsenal was always a small but incredibly sharp iron chisel. The chisel had a blade positioned strictly perpendicular to the handle, making it absolutely ideal for quickly and evenly removing wood. Using a sharp adze, the craftsman masterfully carved deep longitudinal grooves into long logs to create sturdy corner joints. The blade of the tool might have been slightly semicircular, allowing for the creation of smooth recesses of the desired size without splitting the valuable wood. Precise and calibrated chisel strokes required immense practical experience, as a single misstep could instantly ruin an expensive component. Carpenters' measuring tools were extremely simple, but they ensured stunning mathematical precision in all construction calculations. As their main plumb line, master carpenters used an ordinary heavy stone, securely tied to a thin and very strong braided rope. To measure the length of parts, they used straight wooden slats marked with precise geometric notches of standard sizes. The flatness of the wooden edges was checked by simply applying a taut, thin cord to the smooth surface of a processed, dry log. These elementary tools allowed experienced master builders to create complex architectural structures with striking and flawless geometric precision. Every true master had his own individual set of heavy-duty tools, which he cared for with the utmost diligence. The blades of all forged axes and adzes were regularly sharpened on round whetstones to a razor-sharp edge. After each long workday, the tools were carefully rubbed with animal fat to reliably protect the metal from destructive rust and corrosion. The passing of personal work tools from an experienced father to his young son was a very important and touching rite of passage. A good blacksmith's axe was very expensive and often constituted the most valuable material possession in the household of a simple rural carpenter. The arsenal of construction tools vividly reflected the highest level of development of local blacksmithing and metallurgy during that harsh historical period. The iron used to make heavy axes was extracted from local muddy bog ores and subjected to a complex multi-stage heat treatment. The tools of northern craftsmen were adapted as much as possible to the harsh and brutal conditions of the long, cold Scandinavian winter. Thick wooden handles never froze in severe frost as much as bare, cold metal could. The sharpening angle of the heavy working blades was calculated so that the axe would not get stuck in frozen and incredibly hard, icy wood. The shape and overall weight of each tool had been refined by generations of craftsmen to the absolute ideal of ergonomics and practical efficiency. In skilled hands, these simple pieces of iron and wood transformed rough forest logs into cozy and very warm human dwellings. The exterior appearance and internal proportions of the classic longhouse were strictly dictated by the need for maximum resistance to hurricane-force winds. The building had a strongly elongated shape with rounded or slightly sloped end walls, resembling the inverted hull of a huge ship. This unique aerodynamic shape allowed the massive structure to cut through even the strongest and most destructive currents of frigid air with ease and safety. The wind simply flowed gently around the smooth, streamlined walls, finding absolutely no flat obstacles against which to unleash its immense power. This striking architectural technique was directly borrowed by local builders from the experienced shipbuilders of that turbulent maritime era. The central wooden columns supporting the heavy turf roof were arranged in two perfectly straight, parallel rows along the entire length of the building. These massive pillars bore the entire incredible, colossal weight of the powerful, multi-layered earthen roof structure. The outer earthen walls bore no significant structural load, serving solely as a thermal insulation and windbreak. This intelligent distribution of enormous physical loads made it possible to construct very long buildings without the slightest risk of the heavy ceiling collapsing. The length of some of the wealthiest homes could exceed 40 meters, demonstrating the incredible capabilities of ancient wooden architecture. The integration of living quarters and a warm barn under a single, vast, thatched roof was a true classic of northern architectural thought. Animals were housed in one half of the elongated building, while numerous people occupied the other, cleaner and more spacious half. Heat from the warm bodies of the livestock slowly flowed into the people's living area, providing additional and completely free winter heating. Animal waste was promptly collected and removed to prevent the spread of dangerous diseases and unbearable odors. This unified, enclosed ecosystem allowed people and livestock to safely survive together in the most extreme winter conditions. The height of the longhouse was carefully calculated to create ideal internal airflow from the central fire pit. There was no suspended ceiling, and the interior was always open all the way up to the uppermost support elements of the heavy roof system. This vast open space under the roof served as a reservoir for collecting warm, smoky air from the burning firewood. The hot smoke remained constantly near the ceiling, without hindering people from breathing fresh air freely down below, near the earthen floor. This simple and incredibly effective ancient natural ventilation system saved thousands of lungs from dangerous and deadly carbon monoxide poisoning. The house was always built with the prevailing strong and cold northern winter winds of the area in mind. The building's sloped gable ends always faced the strongest and coldest airflow coming from the cold sea. Every log, every clod of earth, and every carefully calibrated proportion was designed solely for survival in the harsh northern climate. It was a true machine for safe habitation, constructed from the simplest and most accessible natural materials found in forests and meadows. The longhouse has forever become an eternal monument to stunning human ingenuity in the face of cold and merciless natural forces. The philosophy of classical northern construction differed radically from modern approaches to building comfortable and safe residential structures. Ancient craftsmen never attempted to completely subjugate the harsh surrounding nature or drastically alter the existing cold landscape. Instead, they sought ways to adapt their wooden dwellings as fully as possible and to blend them gently with the aggressive natural environment. A house was always viewed not as a foreign object, but as a natural, logical extension of the rocky ground and dense green forest. Such deep respect for the forces of mighty nature allowed for the construction of incredibly reliable shelters that did not conflict with the elements. Any construction was always perceived by people as an incredibly important and deeply sacred life process, requiring adherence to numerous rules. Choosing a site for the future massive home involved long observations of snow behavior, wind strength, and water flow. Builders carefully studied where the snow melted fastest in the spring and where massive, heavy winter snowdrifts accumulated. These simple, natural clues unerringly pointed to the driest, most wind-protected and safest areas for laying the foundation. Man did not impose his rigid will on nature, but humbly asked it for a reliable refuge from the endless, deadly cold. The reuse of all available building materials was an absolute norm under conditions of constant, severe resource scarcity. When dismantling old and rotten structures, every intact oak log was carefully cleaned and reused to build new walls. Old, dry moss was gathered from the cracks, thoroughly dried in the spring sun, and reused to insulate the new log cabin. This thrifty, circular economy allowed entire settlements to survive successfully without the need for constant and exhausting logging of new forests. High-quality wood was regarded as a tremendous material asset intended to serve people for many decades and centuries. A sense of responsibility toward future generations was one of the main internal moral motivations for every experienced northern craftsman. Houses were built with the expectation that the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the original builders would be able to live in them comfortably and safely. Therefore, all massive joints and important load-bearing elements were designed with a multiple and enormous margin of structural physical strength. The master understood that the very survival of his distant and as yet unborn descendants depended directly on the quality of his hard work today. This created incredibly high internal standards of quality that could not be ensured solely through coercion or external control. The complex process of erecting a massive house always had a distinctly collective character and united all the community's residents. A lone individual was absolutely incapable of cutting down a sufficient number of heavy trees or laying hundreds of blocks of heavy, damp turf. Construction required incredible solidarity, a clear division of responsibilities, and each person's complete trust in the skills of their numerous neighbors. As a result, the massive wooden house that was erected became an enduring symbol of social unity and the insurmountable collective strength of the entire settlement. Within these thick walls, the immense physical energy of many dozens of tenacious and strong human hands was literally embedded and preserved. The northern builders' perception of time as infinitely long also differed greatly from the modern, fast-paced and very rapid tempo of life. They were in no hurry whatsoever to complete a large-scale construction project by a specific, short deadline, sacrificing quality for the sake of speed in erecting the walls. Every element of their unique and complex architecture tells a separate, stunning story of a difficult struggle, demonstrated patience, and the triumph of the human spirit. Thick timber gave them immense strength, loose soil provided them with reliable protection, and icy snow offered precious warmth. In the hands of skilled and incredibly experienced craftsmen, these three simplest natural elements were transformed into utterly impregnable fortresses. The classic longhouse remains a great masterpiece of ancient engineering, one that continues to amaze with its pragmatism. These ancient walls forever capture the unyielding and powerful spirit of all the ancient people of the harsh northern world. This raises the question of how applicable these ancient lessons in survival and architectural philosophy are in today's ever-changing world. Viewers are invited to share in the comments important historical topics for future videos that they would like to explore in detail and see covered. Subscribing to the channel guarantees completely new and in-depth explorations of the most fascinating, intriguing, and unsolved architectural mysteries of the distant past.